look, if we've had reverse engineering, like for example, Ross Coulthart came out and said the tic tac is ours. It's human. I've seen no evidence for that. I have no idea. If that's the case, then yeah, like of course you're going to see, venture capitalists. The dirty little secret of the UFO world or whatever is like everybody does have this sort of autobiographical personal quest that they're on, and they've experienced sort of magical things in their own life. He brought Dave to my house in LA 2 years before he came out or something. He even said like what I was doing was like, 4D or 5D hologram porting itself into 4D space-time. They've treated David Grusch like shit. They've treated Jake Barber like shit. The people who they'll go on this like quest around the UFO thing, and then they're like they just come back to like sort of God or Jesus or Moses, whatever it is for them.
My dog, and I assume a lot of dogs, has no idea what a leash is. Like it can't put this idea into its head, right? That if the leash goes around a pole, there is nothing, he can't move. He's going to be trapped. The leash doesn't exist in his world.
That's what I worry about. I think for if you're like in the spooky intel world, it's like it's just easy to like mind control like whole swaths of people. It's like it's pretty fucked up.
Chris Lehto, welcome to Lehto Files.
I'm thrilled to be joined by Jesse Michels. He's the insightful host of American Alchemy, and he's been pushing the conversation forward on UAPs with some of the most compelling interviews, from David Grusch's historic whistleblower testimony to Harold Malcolm's explosive claims, Jake Barber's crash retrieval stories, and revelations from military insiders, including Green Berets. Jesse's work is helping to reshape public understanding of the phenomenon. So today we'll dive into what he's learned, what it might mean, and where this is all heading. Thank you so much for being here, Jesse. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Chris. I appreciate you, man. I'm a fan of your show, and I'm doing well and ready to get into it.
Yeah, thanks so much for connecting. I'm really stoked for this interview. You've spotlighted Silicon Valley's growing interest in UAPs, so you're well connected. I hear that all the time with figures like Peter Thiel. Do you think Silicon Valley is interested in this phenomenon? Is that where curiosity comes from?
I think there's an increasing curiosity on the part of Silicon Valley. I don't think they're that interested, though. I think that's more of an internet conspiracy that they are. They're very, Silicon Valley's very like, what can this do for me near term? And is any of this investable? Is their mindset. And I think with the UAP, UFO sort of stuff, there are people who I'm, going to interview this woman named Anna Brady Estevez, who comes from the National Science Foundation, and I think she's going to do a private fund around, UAP, and that's really cool. But I personally haven't seen like that's my background is venture capital, and like I still occasionally I still help with like the startups that I've invested in, prosaic startups that have nothing to do with UAP. Obviously, if there were something that were like extremely compelling that were UAP related that was investable, like I think it would be on my radar, especially given how deep I am on the media side, meeting all these people and stuff. And I haven't seen much, to be totally frank with you. I see things that are really exciting from a, you know, fundamental science, like can we push humanity forward, perspective, right? Like can you prove out, the Byfield Brown effect, or can you prove out, you know, um, some metamaterial that like, is fabricated on an atomic level, which like humans can't do, or like, extended electrodynamics. Can you create sort of a sensor for like, electromagnetic waves that propagate at 1/r, not 1/r squared? Like they don't attenuate over space-time, the same way. There are all these things that are like very exciting, extremely out there frontier, novel effects, right? The Casimir effect, things like that. Can you keep that stable for a long period of time? But like the delta between that and like a company that's functional is extremely, extremely wide, right? Like Niels Bohr didn't found a semiconductor company. He was working on quantum theory. So like from my perspective, I think it's easy because most of people who are in UFOs, UAPs are like inherently irreverent. They're conspiratorial, like I think in sometimes a very healthy way. And so they view the Silicon Valley thing as like, oh, they're gonna like immediately like take over the space and invest and whatever. And look, if we've had reverse engineering like for example, Ross Coulthart came out and said the tic tac is ours. It's human. I've seen no evidence for that. I have no idea. If that's the case, then yeah, like of course you're going to see, venture capitalists, chomping at the bit. But that stuff just feels hand wavy to me. I haven't. I have no reason to believe we have like super workable, ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles or whatever. So we'd be basing that off of like three different anecdotes, and the anecdotes actually seem, somewhat compelling in the case of Mark McCandlish and Bob Lazar and stuff. But I think that you need more than that to get Silicon Valley interested. So I find myself kind of in between, people in UFO space who are like convinced that they're like extremely interested in encroaching, and then I'll meet with Silicon Valley people and I'll try to get them interested because I think it would be great if we saw more investment in the space, more high agency people who like build companies like interested. I mean, I think that would just be a net good for everybody. And like usually I get, kind of cynicism and like who cares back on the Silicon Valley
Oh,
side. So yeah.
what's the third example? You mentioned McCandlish and Lazar. What do you think is the third example of possible ARV tech?
Of ARVs. You have like Edgar Fouché, the TR3B, TR3A, spinning Mercury. I think he was he associated with EG&G? I'm not sure. But he came out saying sort of, that those were like alien derived, technology. You have Michael Herrera saying that, in Indonesia, and his thing, his testimony obviously dovetails with Jake Barber in many ways. But in Indonesia, after Operation Kitsana, his Marine unit was sort of detoured, moved to Indonesia. They basically saw like this Vanta black, like blacker than black craft that was hovering over the treetops. It was 300 feet uh, in diameter, and it was like this octagonal, like he calls it an eight-gon because it wasn't. I guess there are some differences between an octagon and an eight-gon. It was like this fractalized, sort of like it was like an octagon on top, then another octagon, then another octagon. It was like moving. It was like concave, and he thinks that that might have been human tech, but derived from sort of exotic alien stuff. So there's stories like that, but then you have to ask the question, you know, would it be smarter, advantageous from a tech protection standpoint to like call human tech alien or something? And like it probably would. So like the burden
Yep.
of proof on somebody saying that an exotic craft looks, it is derived from alien tech is obviously on the person saying that. Now I have every reason to believe Michael Herrera saw what he saw. I think he's a very honest, credible person. I'm increasingly becoming high conviction that Bob Lazar was at S4 Area 51. Mark McCandlish seemed pretty earnest and sincere and had credentials as an aerospace illustrator that well transcended just his discussion of the Norton Air Force Base sighting from Brad Sorensen. So um, yeah, I think there's like you have to slap some probability on the existence of alien reproduction vehicles, but man, I mean the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence has to apply there, right? Like you have to have some pretty high threshold for uh, something that will really take you over the edge.
Yeah, I interviewed Mike Herrera on the channel, and he mentioned the octagon. And I was really impressed because then Jake Barber came out. And I mean, your interview with Jake Barber I thought was amazing. And then the community just went nuts because Logan Paul was there for some reason, and that somehow blew it out of the water, even though it was amazing testimony. But then that's when I think Jake Barber said the octagon or the eight gon. Jake Barber called it the eight gon, which then weirdly vibed with Mike Herrera about the octagon shaped craft. That's what I remember.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was fascinating to see their testimonies kind of dovetail. And Michael Herrera's the reason I started to build trust in the Jake testimony in some ways was, meeting him and sussing him out, but also uh, Mike Herrera's testimony from the Disclosure Project, Congress that
Yep.
Stephen Greer had in 2023. That story was always like the weirdest story. I remember that story.
Yeah.
It was sort of seared in my memory because I was like, "What? Like you went to Indonesia and you saw this bizarre human trafficking thing and this craft above the treetop, like,
Yeah.
and you were apprehended by a human, probably former special forces with advanced technology. Like it just felt if you were writing a script, this would be the last story you would write. Like it was too weird." Um, and then Jake Barber comes out and he starts talking about, psionic assets. And I was higher conviction in parapsychology before any of the alien stuff. So like that made so much sense intuitively to me, actually. I think for a lot of people, especially in that first Ross shorter edit, I think a lot of people were like, wait, you're telling me I have to stomach parapsychology and psionic assets, the fact that you retrieved a crowd, like all of these things all at once, like this is a
Yeah.
little too much. I'm drinking from a fire hose. But to me, it like pattern matched more
Mm.
than
Yeah.
somebody who would just pure nuts and bolts. Like, I was like working on this thing like any other sort of aircraft. Um, so yeah, I found that to be kind of a fascinating kind of one-two punch of things. And Herrera, when you speak to him, you get a very like irreverent, like, kind of like just as, gonna tell it like it is vibe. And he's pretty kind of iconoclastic, and he'll like go at people if he like thinks they're lying and stuff. So again, like unless you have experienced something yourself, you can't know 100%. Everybody can be sort of tricked, but I put a lot of weight in both of those testimonies. And yeah, the Logan Paul thing, man, it's like it's tough. He showed up, he like asked a question that I thought was pretty good, and
Yeah.
then he said that like I'd love for my daughter to grow up in a post-disclosure world. And like, I don't know, you say what you will about him. I know there've been scandals in his life in the past. I think anybody who's grown up with that much fame and attention at that young of an age, I'm sure has had similar experiences, and he seems relatively actually well adjusted to me given that. But I'm not here to defend, any of that sort of stuff. He's been nothing but cool to me. The point was like when we met Jake, we FaceTimed him, or like it was on it was a pretty secure platform that wasn't FaceTime, but
Wow.
it was like a de facto FaceTime, if you will. And Logan was on the call, and Jake moves the camera over, and his son is so excited to meet Logan. And apparently, Jake was like, "Yeah, there are Prime bottles all over, his room or
Cool.
whatever." And so, like, that felt like this synchronistic, very kind of meant to be thing. And so I thought, it was really cool of Logan. Logan's a busy guy. He's like
Yeah.
doing a lot of crazy stuff with his life, and I think he's genuinely into this topic. Like he took the time to watch my interview with Rogan, which and then commented, like texted me about it afterwards and stuff. So
Hmm.
um, I have nothing but good things to say about the guy, and he took time out of his day to do this and lend his platform to this whole thing. And it was just absurd how little people cared about the substance and how
Yeah.
much people kind of indexed on Logan. I think people see what they want to see. And you asked a question about Peter Thiel up top, and that's I think it's a valid thing for anybody to inquire into. But I worked at the guy's family office, and I invested with him. and he doesn't give a shit about UFOs. Like
Well,
he really at times he's like, expressed like kind of an intellectual curiosity, maybe insofar as it dovetails with some interesting kind of metaphysical or like biblical themes or things like that. Things like he's exploring more, I think, at this point in his life. Um, but the like, reverse engineering, stuff, that from that perspective, like he just doesn't care. At least in his, in my sort of comms with him. Um, so I don't know, like in on some level, it'd be cool if he sort of cared more, but most of the UFO related stuff that I've surfaced like years ago. I've stopped surfacing stuff around that. He's passed on and said, I'm just not interested. And all 99% of our conversations are around, again, prosaic technology companies that was my job to invest in with him. And you know, uh, then it's like occasionally, like at the end of our conversations, he's like, "What's going on with the crazy UFO stuff or whatever?" But
yeah,
that's it. Like it's not. I don't know. And then if you can look, you can go on my YouTube channel. The first show is with Jake Paul, and then the 11th show was with Gary. I think I'm making these numbers up. Maybe then it was the first 8 shows. I don't know, 10 shows, 11 shows, whatever. They're all like really low views. Nobody watched them. And then the first show that blew up was with Gary Nolan. And so, like, not only like does it make sense from an algorithm perspective if you're like trying to make a show work, that would be cynical if that were the only motivation. But I felt like it was an expression of my genuine interest uh, that made that show work, along with the fact that you had a Stanford professor claiming he had UFO parts with isotope ratios that didn't,
yeah.
pattern match to asteroids or like anything prosaic. Like, so like that was what happened with the show. Of course, you're trying to build an audience, and then you're trying to do the thing that's most authentic to you. And, I love startup investing, but I don't think people care about that. I think people really care about like nature of reality, who are we as humans, metaphysics, those sorts of things. So it organically kind of moved in that direction. And to be quite honest with you, I kind of want to broaden out again because I'm a little sick of the insularity and kind of, circular reporting and absurd community infighting of UFO world. It's just kind of nuts. But
Oh, what do you
yeah,
mean? I haven't noticed.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah. So
it's easy to get burned out for
yeah.
sure. I feel the same. And since then, because I remember when your videos came out, I may have even watched some of your videos before Gary Nolan. I don't know, but I definitely
Oh, that's
remember
awesome.
American
Thank
Alchemy.
you.
And you would make like a video every few months, and it would just kill it. I remember
Yeah.
that, and I was just like grinding every
Yeah.
day, and I was like, how does he do it? Like I should just make one video like you did every few months.
Yeah, well, it's funny. That's been the trajectory is like, initially it was like it was not my full-time thing, and I just really enjoyed it and I put a lot of love into it, and it was like a side thing.
Yeah,
And I loved like just releasing things irregularly, but like dropping kind of bombs when they came out. And then more recently, I don't get like I don't get paid at all for the venture capital stuff, anymore. So that was like a deal that expired or whatever, and it's become my like full time thing. So I really am working hard to like be consistent, and it's great. It's a lot of fun, and I'm definitely super passionate about it. It's forced me to think about it, it's like a very, real business with a P&L and that sort of thing. But with that,
mm,
you do also lose at times the, like, oh, I would just do it when I was struck by inspiration. And that,
yeah,
that's obviously a good place to be if you can sort of do that.
yeah. I completely know how you feel completely, because it's also the problem with doing your passion as a job is then it turns out you're doing your passion as a job, and so it comes out to be the job kind of can ruin the passion or stamp on it. It's difficult to stay motivated, especially when you get audience capture, because you look like Rogan, he can do podcasts on whatever the hell he wants, whatever he's
Yes.
interested in, he can talk about that. People are like, oh, that
Yeah.
makes sense. But as soon as I make a video that's not about UFOs, man, I get so many negative comments like, what are you doing? No one
I
clicks on it.
know.
Yeah. It's amazing audience capture.
It's crazy. I did one on I had Matt Pines on, who's like a
Yeah.
brilliant like analyst when it comes to the UFO stuff. And he was talking because he knows a lot about AI and Bitcoin. We talked about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is not like me launching a meme coin. It's
Yeah.
like a really interesting, intellectually interesting thing.
Yeah.
And like all the comments were like, "Dude, now you're shilling crypto," and it's like, what are you talking about? This
Yeah.
thing is almost at the market cap of gold, and
Yeah.
it's like a digital currency that involves like really novel cryptographic means. It's a mystery as to who the founder is. Like it's
Yeah.
totally adjacent to the UAP thing. It's like this novel for sovereign stateless version of money. It should actually be very in line with somebody who's interested in
Yeah.
UAP.
Yeah.
And I just got like creamed in the comments, just completely like destroyed. And it's
Yeah.
like I'm interested in that stuff. Like I'm not just your UFO monkey. Like
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. We do have other interests and passions.
yeah, we're like people.
And I imagine, and I think long term, that's probably the best way to do it is to just go with passions and somehow make it work. At least
Yeah.
that's what I'm finding is, yeah, I'm going to do what I'm interested in. But if it's not exciting, this topic and job is really difficult, you know, it's
Yeah.
not that easy.
No,
Yeah.
you have to totally. I think you have to follow your pure curiosity, and you have to eat the bad views, bad comments when you're like initially starting to broaden out. You probably have to do it somewhat strategically and broaden out in concentric circles. So it's like things that are adjacent to the thing you're covering, maybe some, you know, ancient archaeology that's like slightly alternative, or
Yeah.
the remote viewing stuff and consciousness, and secret physics or whatever. But I don't know, man. Yeah, I think you ultimately you just have to follow what you care about. I was talking to my girlfriend last night, and I was like, what if I just put like music playlists up on the on the channel? Like,
Yeah.
would people be really angry, or would they think it's like kind of cool and like disrupting the pattern? You know, it's tough. It's also like you want to do justice to you've broken like these very real, incredible whistleblowers, and like I don't want to obviously self stigmatize or anything, but it's also like I don't know. It's a very tough spot to be in, covering the thing we're covering, because you're going to be a grifter unless you incrementally, uncover more every single show.
Yeah.
And you lead to what's the logical conclusion of that? You have to be at Area 51, like unveiling a saucer and a hanger.
Yeah.
And if you're not, then you've failed.
Grifting.
And so, yeah, you're a grifter, right?
Yeah.
So it's it's like more stories, more stories. Like, what are you talking about? We're talking about like the most like locked down technology like in United States government history. Like, what
Yeah.
do you what do you want to do? What can I do? What do you want? Like, so, I think there's a threshold past which you get enough of these whistleblowers saying all the same things.
Yeah.
You can't explain that away from mass psychosis and all sorts of, it's Occam's razor is that there actually is that they're there. But yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. It's a tough spot for them too. I often feel, after they do go public, they get treated like shit. Like
Yeah.
they've treated David Grusch like shit. They've treated Jake Barber like shit. It's it's uh it's bad. And they
Where do you,
display a lot of courage for coming out. Yeah, go for it.
or I was just curious where you think that comes from. Do you think it's like actual people in the military industrial complex, they're doing this to discredit them? Or do you think it's just the people have been so programmed against this, or they've been burned so many times in the past? Why do you think people come out with such negative energy against these whistleblowers?
Well, I think it's often the people who are deify them that flip, and they're like the most against them. So there's
Mhm.
definitely this archetype of person, for example, that like started avidly following like Lou Elizondo, and then Lou, put out a couple things that got debunked since, or like said a couple things that weren't right or whatever, and those same people are now like hate Lou. They hate him.
Yeah.
And I think the like healthy thing to do is like just be like, yeah, that's like a guy who's like, it's a data point. You take, the stuff with, somewhat of a grain of salt, but like, it's all good. Like if he gets certain things wrong, like it's okay. And then the things he does say, you never took just fully at face value. Like you don't take anything for granted or at face value. And then you're not flipping in this weird direction. You maintain, you know, the ability to look through his stuff in like this kind of even-handed way. And I find that there's this like archetype of person that like they'll deify these whistleblowers, and then they'll flip on the in the opposite direction.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think on the whistleblower side, I think the thing that they have to look out for is being sort of like softened and like brought back into the fold. And like, it's like, oh, you're not getting any love on the, Congress isn't giving you any love. They're not giving you any protection. The executive branch doesn't give a shit. And then, you're getting these like spooky legacy guys like reaching back out, being like, thank you for doing what you're doing. Like there's a place for you on the inside or
On the
whatever.
inside.
I'm sure that happens a lot. And so like if you're them, you're caught between some like weird like old money cult from like Huntsville, Alabama, that like they swear some weird like, blood oaths to each other, and like, they're into some, interesting spooky stuff. You're caught between them and the like the like idiot like civilian Congress. And I don't say that as it's not a joke. Like they're really like a lot of them are really dumb. They're really, I wish they weren't. I wish, and it always makes me when I speak to like people like, Carl Nell, who I really like, but he's like very adamant about the, UAP Disclosure Act. Like I think it's really important insofar as, we can get proof that these things are, and we get like a panel that can, maybe start to distribute these things and talk about the implications of distributing, this information in a more systematic way. Like that would definitely be an improvement. So I'm extremely pro UAPDA. But um, at the same time, I like, I've been to, these hearings a couple of times, and I'm like, this is a joke. Like these people are like, they almost don't even deserve or want like, what they're asking for in some weird way. They just sort of care about getting reelected. So if you're a whistleblower, like you're caught between these, like, this spooky world that like knows a lot and is like really interesting, and they're treating you kind of nicely, and then this like these civilian representatives who probably aren't, they don't know their ass from their forehead, and like that's a really tough spot to be in, right? And then like these people in public who are like, you said a thing and but you didn't prove it, and you didn't follow up on it or whatever, you're not saying more, and in your mind, you're like, well, I would just try to do this in the right way and push the executive branch in the right direction. I'm not, trying to be Ed Snowden or whatever. Um, so, that's a really tough spot to be in. Um, and then, yeah, constantly being sort of gaslit, and, I'm sure people trying to, fish for information constantly. And, my heart goes out to them.
Yeah, you've really met a lot of these people just firsthand and spent, you know, hours with them in person, like David Grusch. I had one question on the
Mhm.
Discord is how did
Yeah.
you meet David Grusch? How did you get that interview, I guess?
Yeah, I was actually diligencing a company, and the company had sort of like the guy had left Space Force and started this company, and it was a company in aerospace, and this was in my day job, like just
Ah,
like
cool.
investing with Peter, and I was diligencing it, and at the end of the diligence period, I was like, dude, you were in Space Force. Like, do you must know a thing about UFOs. And this was at the period where I was like, do you think they're real? Like,
Hey, yeah.
like what's up? And he goes, yeah, I think they're very real. He was like,
Oh,
honestly, I'm not like an expert on this stuff, but I had this guy that I served in the Air Force with like a long time ago, who I've kept in touch with socially. And he knows a lot about this stuff, and he's like looking into it right now.
oh.
And you should probably meet him. He has like mild autism,
That's so
and like
awesome.
yeah, so he brought Dave to my house in LA, like I want to say like a year and a half before he came out, or 2 years before he came out, or something. And yeah, just honestly, it was a refreshing experience for me,
Mm,
because at the time I was like, this in my mind, I was like, this is, really quacky and crazy.
Yeah.
But like, if it's real, it's like the most important thing ever. And I had like some decent knowledge on it, but I just, I don't know. I thought it was kind of a joke. I thought it was, I didn't really know like how to, treat the entire subject. And he just pattern matched to this guy who was like, like if I said a thing that like wasn't, you know, um, something that he believed in or whatever, like he would sort of call me out on it. And he was very first principles and like extremely smart, like scientifically. Like, he has like a, cyber background, but is, yeah, he's versed in like software, but also like understands like astrophysics and physics. I think he just has a bachelor's in physics, but like he's smarter than your average physics bachelor's guy and like
Yeah.
no really understands like space and the space economy and worked in all these kind of prosaically very important contexts in the government. He handled the presidential daily brief and stuff. um so and clearly was, I think, like a top performing guy at the National Geospatial Agency. Like only all of his colleagues only had good things to say about this guy, again, in like these conventional roles. So that was a revelation. I was like, this is crazy. Like this has to add to my conviction.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was the story.
Do you think your background in, diligencing companies helps you in investigating on the phenomena?
Yeah, for sure. Because that, like, yeah, definitely. It's. I think I studied history in college, and then
Cool.
partially because of the least amount of credits, and I hated school, but it was also because I had a natural talent for it, and like so the two things I think that like help me in this field are like I have like pretty good recall, like I just remember a lot of shit,
Yeah, your
and
recall's amazing, dude. Yeah. You can pull stuff out.
thank you.
Facts.
I appreciate it. That's the only compliment I'll take. I'm bad at a lot of other stuff, and but yeah, I do. I have good recall, and then the diligence thing is really important too. Like the
Mm.
ability to suss out, basically, like in venture capital, you can't be a domain expert in everything. So if you are diligencing, a company in a specific area, more likely than not, you aren't coming from that area, and you have to take some certain things as priors, certain things at face value. Obviously, you need to stress test as much as possible. So you cannot assume anything. But at a certain point of probability, you have to say the risk reward makes sense, and I'm going to invest
Uh,
in this company. And so it basically, like, the number one skill I think in venture capital, outside of the follow up investigation of what the person says and trying to corroborate it, is like, is the person, as the purveyor of information, full of shit?
yeah.
Like, very few people are doing really first principles analysis on everything being told to them. I think people, somebody's like lying if they're saying they are like, it is ultimately a bet. It's a probabilistic sort of gamble or whatever. um so I think that skill really, this the ability to like suss people out and like, tell if they're lying to you. And then where it's tricky in UFO space is like somebody could have an ulterior motive, but also be telling the truth about the core details of what they experienced. And so like that's like it's kind of like a form of lying, but it's not lying, right? It's not like you're not lying on the surface level details, but like there's a reason you're coming out, and maybe you're doing some controlled opposition thing, or you're like, you're spinning like the details that like matter in a way that like throws people off or whatever. Like there are all these different tactics, right, that you can do, where you're like not telling a lie on the substance. Like say the iceberg is the substance below the water, you're not telling a lie on any of that. And then the top like 5 or 10%, you're like spinning in a way that like kind of misframes the thing. Like there are all these things like that you have to be like extremely hyper vigilant and aware of. And I'll be the first to say that I've definitely fallen prey to, like, I can guarantee
Yeah.
you now that I've gotten stuff wrong. I've been tricked. I don't think you really can be in this field and not have said that. So it's like the best thing to do is just off yourself, and then just to say that you're the only thing you can guarantee is that you're being like earnest in your readouts of things and assessing. things and sort of move forward.
Yeah, that seems like the most important thing from my limited understanding of venture capital, which I assume is going for startups, is the founder, right? Is the founder and his team, do they have integrity and can they accomplish the mission? So it seems like that would be perfect for actually trying to suss out any. Is this the idea of limited hangouts? I noticed you mentioned that on Rogan a few times. Is that what you mean really by that?
Yeah. Limited hangout is like, somebody coming out of the intelligence world. And they say a certain amount of stuff in a way that, it could serve a bunch of different purposes. It could like soften the blow if there is an eventual leak, because there is an eventual leak, then somebody else is setting themselves up
Hmm.
to be the authority on that thing. But you were like, no, I said that like a year before or whatever. And then you sort of like, yeah, so you could do like controlled opposition with it. You can do like recruiting with it, where you let out certain surface level details, and people get initiated, based on those surface, like there's like Cicada 3301 or whatever, this like, these like complex like math problems that were like in puzzles online, and people think that the CIA and NSA were associated with the puzzles. So if like you had the aptitude to figure out these puzzles, which I think required some like math abilities in certain cases, like then like you deserve to be part of the agency or something. So like some of the UFO stuff could be, you know, things like that, where it's like, we're going to give you like a slightly adjacent, to the truth thing. Let's see if you can get to the truth through the adjacent thing. And if you can, then like we're going to hire you or whatever. So I think a lot of that goes on in UFO world. And then the other thing, that the other way in which it works, if you're Intel, is like you can track the falsities because you can put unique falsities in it. And so it's like a dye that you're putting into pipes, and you see where the dye goes. So you can track, like, it's like you can see like who the spies are and the bad actors are.
Hmm.
And then the final thing is, you can say people react the wrong way, and the thing was 90% true but 10% false. You can then just retract it and be like, oh, but this 10% thing is false. And then so you like completely destroy the field or whatever. It's this
Hmm.
crazy thing. It's like a Rorschach test. Like if you want to try out whether it makes sense to disclose or not, that's what you would do. And then the final um, thing that you can do, I'm blanking on the final thing. What's the final thing? There's so many ways in which like it's like an adaptive mode of communication. And that, like, a good example is I just looked into the Aztec crash, and like you can
Hmm.
Wikipedia and it says Aztec crash hoax. Like it's
Huh.
crazy. And everybody, this like UFO this guy who claims to have like 30 years of UFO research, and he just DMs me on Twitter and he's like, the Aztec crash is a hoax. And
Yeah.
and he's just so sure, and he keeps repeating it. It's like it's a hoax, it's a hoax, it's a hoax. And I'm responding with like, I actually think the Bill Steinman book is pretty good, and I think that Scott and Suzanne Ramsey have found a lot, and like I go into Silas Newton and all the the stuff, and like uh man, I'm just like not getting any like first principles like responses in the back. So it's so easy, I think, for if you're like in the spooky intel world, it's like it's just easy to like mind control like whole swaths of people. It's like it's
Hmm.
pretty fucked up. And like that, that was just one example where, yeah, very few people are like looking into things kind of first principles. I mean, you saw it with the pandemic too, where like
Yeah.
I think I have this in writing, like that I was saying that the lab leak theory was a thing in March of 2020. And it was, honestly, I can't take full credit for it because I was around people who were smarter than me on some of this stuff. But like you just think probabilistically, right? You have like a lab that's studying SARS-like viruses, and then
Yeah.
you have this like this modification essentially of SARS that like binds to the ACE2 protein, with or sorry, the ACE2 receptor with the spike protein or whatever, and then you get this outbreak like right there, like it's obviously that, and then they have bad safety marks, like it's that, it's obviously that. You have wet
Yeah.
markets all around China. Why is it popping up right next to that? But like very few people, I think, can declutter their mind and do that. That's like, especially when you're being like the most people are very consensus thinkers, and
Mm.
you're really like you get caught up in these like kind of mass hysteria sessions. So like yeah, I think that takes place even in UFO world too.
Yeah, and then I mean, didn't we find out like literally that it was a lab leak? Isn't that true? I mean, it's almost like you can't even like think about it in your head. Like, was it a lab leak? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it was, right? I mean,
Now, yes, that's a great example because now it's literally even I think the CIA has come out and said like we think that this was a lab leak. There's an Eco Health Alliance proposal to DARPA, saying or I think it was it's a proposal to DARPA saying we want to build a version of SARS that binds to human ACE2 receptors. You can find this online. You can Google it, and then
yeah,
the NIH through Fauci basically reroutes it to China, which is America's greatest adversary. So it's
that's
like
amazing.
building some like yeah, it's like you're in World War II and like you're building some like chemical weapons thing in Japan or Germany or something. It like makes no sense. It's absurd. Um, so yeah, no, that's all totally factual now. But like my point is you just needed like basic Bayesian probability, like basic good inference thinking, like
Yep.
that like a 12-year-old should be able to do, which is you have wet markets all over China, and then you have this one lab studying this thing that deals with SARS like pandemics or whatever, and they're testing. There's a contract with them around allowing it to bind to human ACE2 receptors. Like obviously, it's
Yeah.
just and the outbreak occurs 7 miles away is like the first case or whatever. It's not this fucking pangolin bullshit. And like
Yeah.
Alina Chan and Matt Ridley wrote this book called Viral, and they went into all the first principles stuff about literally if you look at the genetics of the genome of COVID, like it was obviously synthetic, it was obviously
Mm.
man-made. um so you can go on and on and on, but all you need is that high level thing. I mean, Jon Stewart encapsulated this best in his joke on the Colbert Report. He goes, "There's a Hershey chocolate outbreak. There's a chocolate outbreak in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I wonder where it is." And he goes, "The outbreak, the pandemic was cured by science, and it was started by science." And you see Colbert, I'm sure, because he's sponsored by Pfizer or whatever, starting to like want to cut to commercials prematurely. So yeah, no, I think that's been totally vindicated. But it's the good thinking that they sort of, or the bad thinking rather, that mass media, mainstream media sort of arbitraged against in kind of pushing their narratives. It wasn't anything to do with first principles facts or analysis or whatever. Um, and it's really easy to shame people into thinking, it's like
Yep.
people are like, like everybody knows that, it's a hoax. Everybody knows this. Everybody, you just repeat it over and over again. And it's like UFOs are fake. This or that, and it's like okay, okay, fine, I believe it.
Well,
But like
look,
very few people actually like look into this stuff.
exactly. I mean, look at advertising, right? I mean, everyone's heard
Yeah,
of McDonald's, right? Everyone has heard of
yeah,
Burger King, and yet they still spend billions and billions of dollars every year, right? You don't need to like let people know about McDonald's, right? The whole point
yeah,
of it
yeah,
is they pay to just keep it going into your brain to literally program us. Because
yeah,
even thinking
yeah. And
about
I'm
the
sure
lab
that
leak, I'm like, was that real? Like, yeah, it's been like, I don't know. It seems like we're
yeah.
programmed.
No, it's nuts. And they'll just like continue to gaslight you. Like Fauci will go in front of Congress, change the definition of gain of function research before he goes and is questioned by Rand Paul so that he can continue to lie and say not gain of function, not gain of function. It's like
Yeah.
the amount of cynicism at that level around the American population's ability to deduce truth is so high. It's like it's crazy. I don't know what sort of cognitive dissonance exists in a person like that. I don't know if he's pure evil, uh, you know, but it's crazy.
I thought it was interesting too. We mentioned Jake Barber, and I thought it was crazy that Jake Barber was actually at that disclosure briefing you talked about. and he said he was there, and he watched Mike Herrera's testimony, and that's what actually changed Barber, because he was there doing like a red team. So he was going to go and to investigate to see what was known in the civilian world, if you will.
Yeah, it's really wild. Yeah, he basically was like, I was there on behalf of my employer,
Yeah,
red teaming whistleblowers
that was crazy.
and trying to round them up and basically do counter intel on them. And then as soon as he heard Herrera's testimony, he was like, oh, I feel like he's an honest actor, and he sort of was kind of converted. So yeah, it's a really crazy story, and you hear it when you speak to him, and when you heard my interview with him, like just super like sophisticated, savvy guy.
Mm.
Like
Yeah,
he even said like what I was doing was like 4D or 5D hologram porting itself into 4D space time or something, or maybe it was a 4D hologram into, I guess, yeah, it'd be 5D into 4D. Um, and so like it was yeah, he was like he's like I operated in the shadows, and then I would like yeah, David's like we were like, what was your title at the time? And he goes, helicopter pilot,
yes,
whatever, airplane mechanic, and he was um director of like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or something. It was like this, multi hyphenate, like sort of, he was a ghost. He
yeah.
was sort of sheep dipped. Um, so yeah, really, really fascinating sort of background. And I don't know what's going on, with Skywatcher. I hope I'm always of the camp, there's a lot of scarcity dynamics and UFO world, people being like, I don't want this person to break the thing, or I don't want, I,
Yeah,
I hope, I hope Skywatcher finds a UFO. I hope Ross Coulthart, uncovers, some whistleblower that like, ends the speculation. Like, I truly hope,
yeah.
it just comes out in any shape or form. And I don't know what's going on with Skywatcher, but that would be a big hope of mine, given my interview with Jake, where he was like, in 6 months we're going to be able to land one of these things. Like, I'd love to see something like that happen. So yeah, we'll
What
see.
what did you think of the psionics? You kind of mentioned that you were primed for that already, but do you think that's, I guess, what's your background investigating in psionics?
Yeah, I never had a background investigating in psionics, but
Mm.
I was always very interested in parapsychology,
Okay,
like pre the UFO thing. I was really into this, Rupert Sheldrake, this guy who I've interviewed on my show,
cool.
around like morphic resonance and like, information theoretic fields that lie outside of or are orthogonal to DNA transfer. So
Mm.
like people, if like 1,000 people do a crossword puzzle, and then you do, 1,000 people do this other if 1,000 people do a crossword puzzle, and then you have this crossword puzzle nobody's done, like people will finish the crossword puzzle that the 1,000 people have finished a little bit faster, like things like that.
Mm.
Or like you'll grow a crystal structure. It takes a long time the first time, and then once it's in this sort of collective memory, it's easier there on out to grow. Those that specific crystal structure. So I was interested in things like that, and random event generators. The ability to affect a binary computer, super rudimentary binary computer with sort of a mental interface. I think that's probably the most rudimentary form of parapsychology, where like if you're saying that the brain actually is an active participant in choosing an eigenstate and collapsing the wave function into a particular state, then you really have to extrapolate outwards and say that we are rendering reality real time, and that's like a total paradigm shift. So I was very interested in all that stuff pre UFOs.
Mm.
um and in some ways, I think it's upstream of UFOs and like more fundamental and more interesting. And I think the deeper you get into the topic, the more you come back there. And like somebody like a Jacques Vallée obviously studies it on the nuts and bolts level, but clearly understands like the deeper psychological underpinnings of the whole thing. I mean, you the dirty little secret of the UFO world or whatever is like everybody does have this sort of autobiographical personal quests that they're on, and they've experienced sort of magical things in their own life. And so you're talking about people who are bought into like an ontology that are like, is entirely separate from like people who just go about their day and sort of pay their taxes. And that's even true for somebody like Robert Hastings, who like, you know, it's the most rigorous, best sort of database on UFOs because it's,
Yeah.
you know, all these Q cleared guys talking about nuclear cases. Like it's hard to argue with that from like a first principles, perspective. But the way you might try to debunk that or whatever, if you're, a hyper skeptic, is you'd say, well, Hastings has had his own experiences or something. And then you get, to me, that makes it more interesting, not less interesting. And you get into the fact that like maybe reality itself is fractured, and that explains sort of Mandela effects. And you have maybe probable futures, probable pasts, that are sort of consensus based, and then a constricted present, and you're the measurement instrument of that present. And when you are, in a good state, you have almost like state dependent pasts and state dependent futures. And your reality is like a punch card or something, where you're like moving across like different pasts and different futures. There'd be no way to disprove that being true. There's no way to disprove it. There's no way to corroborate it, because you'd have to like, it's like the problem of the eye seeing the eye. But there's actually a guy named Wilder Penfield who was from I think Montreal, Canada, and he was like this like spooky neuroscientist, cognitive psychologist guy who I think was involved in some MK Ultra stuff, and he studied mice that like he basically figured out that like if you just change some neuronal connections, you can implant false memories in mice, and
Oh,
no one like so if somebody can have like certain memories or whatever, like you have no idea like whether that's like some like consensus version of like their past that isn't consistent with somebody else's. Like the Mandela effect itself, it's extremely interesting. Like our model of reality is probably way off. It's probably just way 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 off. um and so that would explain some of the UFO stuff possibly, because it's like um you'd have like reality itself would be this sort of consensus collapsing function. Certain people would have the aperture or like ability to sort of sense these UFOs, other
hmm.
people wouldn't. It's like having a theological debate. Like, have you ever had a theological debate where like you rationally convince somebody that God exists? Like it never works, right?
No.
Like so the person has to be sort of like initiated in this weird, it's like they have an experience in their own life or something gets unlocked in them, or whatever. So that's the tough issue with the whole UFO thing, is it's disclosure isn't going to be some like rational like this like equation on a chalkboard, or like high fidelity imagery or whatever. Like none of this stuff is what's going to necessarily move the needle. It has to hit this like deeper sort of irrational thing that everybody has inside of them, this like this quest for meaning. And some people express that quest for meaning in this dogmatic atheism, so that's like the ironic thing, but everybody has it. That thing doesn't go away. And everybody has this thing that like makes them feel safe in the world of metaphysics. And it could be that metaphysics doesn't exist. But and the UFO thing really speaks to that. And that's why I'm convinced, half the people that are into it. Um, so yeah. So it's like UFOs are just this one. They're it's the tip of the iceberg. It's the tip of the spear, but there's something much deeper going on.
Yeah, I love Rupert Sheldrake's work. I thought it was so smart or innovative when I first started out in this, and I kind of came to the conclusion that if there was a alternate medium like an ether, and we could communicate, if you will, telepathically, right? If essentially, if you could prove telepathy is real, then that would prove that there's a medium to communicate with, which would explain a lot of the woo effects, if you will, like communicating telepathically with other mediums, with channeling mediums, with other entities. So I devised this test. I was so proud of myself, where I called it the telephone test, where basically you have four people that you're friends with, or you get three or four people together, and then you just use a random number generator to pick one of those four people. and
Mm,
they call your contestant, if you will, in the other room, right?
mm.
And but before they call, you already know the random number generator has chosen the person. The contestant tries to guess who's going to call, and I called it the telephone game. And it's actually it's fun actually. You do it at parties, right? Because probabilistically, it should be 25%, right? 1 in 4, you should be able to
Yeah.
guess. If you do enough runs, you have to do 30 runs to make it statistically probable or statistically analyzable, which is difficult, right? That's a lot of runs. So I did this and consistently found higher than 25%, just kind of anecdotally,
Yeah.
not in a scientific setting, and thought I was really smart. Oh, this is amazing. And then I realized Rupert Sheldrake had done this like decades ago, like literally. If you go and look at his YouTube channel,
Yeah.
you'll see these, and it's from like, I don't know, it looks like from the 80s. They're in like 80s style clothes, and they do these telephone
Yeah.
tests, and he's basically proven it scientifically that you get high numbers
Yeah.
well above 30%. It's like 35% up to 50% if they even know each other. Um,
Yeah.
but no one cares, right? It's like,
No one cares.
yeah,
No
no
one
one cares.
cares.
I was like, this is literally mind blowing. Like this, I don't see how that doesn't prove telepathy. I just don't get it. I don't.
No, totally. Well, yeah, yeah. Jessica Utz, in 2016 or 17 was the president of the American Statistical Association. So she
Hmm,
is extremely well respected in stats, not in like just
hmm,
discount any sort of interest in parapsychology. She in the 90s was tasked by the CIA with doing a meta-analysis on psychical research involving Gansfield experiments and
hmm.
Stargate and all these
Yeah.
different psychic experiments. And she came out being like, if this were any other field, it would be beyond a shadow of a doubt that
Yeah.
these all of these results are extremely replicable. Like way more like we talk about psychology like it's this like, really important like, ironclad field. Psychology is way less replicable than parapsychology.
Hmm.
And this has been going on. I mean, you have J.B. Ryan from in the 30s and 40s. You have, the Paralab, the Princeton anomalous, Princeton Engineering and Anomalous Research Lab. Bob John was a plasma physicist. He was the dean of the engineering school at Princeton, and he started Paralab. And he
Wow.
came out being like, I think all of this stuff is real. Nobody who has engaged in the actual study in a deep way
Yeah.
comes out saying that it's fake. So it's this
Yeah.
weird thing where you get this like version of reality that believes in this stuff. And then you go back to, earlier stuff, which is like quantum mechanics. And you realize that a lot of the early godfathers of quantum mechanics flirted with the idea that the mind was part of collapsing the wave function. So, like even Max Planck, who was like, really early and like, developed quanta itself, he was saying, that the mind creates causality. And Schrodinger was, he would say, he was sort of against the mind collapsing the wave function, but like, I think he named his nickname of his dog was like Atman, and like he was super into the Upanishads, and then he wrote he had a whole lecture series called "What Is Life" in 1944 that was like about how consciousness is like upstream of biology, and like
Hmm.
you have these aperiodic crystals in the DNA that like are your intention like effects or whatever. Like it was really trippy. And then you have Wigner and von Neumann, who literally their model, and von Neumann was known as the smartest in his time. He was like this 150 to 200 IQ type that like was a polymath, knew everything about everything. And he was like, I think the mind has something to do with collapsing the wave function. So John Wheeler flirted with sort of ideas adjacent to this, along with Tipler. Um, all of these like top guys like believed in things like this. Pauli definitely was, maybe a proponent of this at times. Um,
Hmm.
and then it just moves into like this, no, your mind has nothing to do with it. And
Yeah.
I'm convinced that that is because we can't turn parapsychology into math, and it's not perfectly repeatable. So you can't turn it into math or technology. And because it's not perfectly repeatable, you can't turn it into math or technology. It just falls into this like anomaly bucket where it's like black body radiation or like certain observations in the past, like the Casimir effect is now, where no scientist would argue that the Casimir effect, isn't real. Everybody would say it's real. it's an anomaly. It's just it's a thing that breaks the current theory, but we don't have a good theory that encapsulates it. And if you get enough anomalies, then you get it breaks the dam of the current theory, and you get a new theory. And that's the whole,
Mm.
Thomas Kuhn's, structure of scientific revolution. So I'm convinced parapsychology is just a harbinger of the next paradigm. But you can't argue with people with the data. Like, one of my closest mentors and friends helped run the Princeton lab under Bob John, and he worked on this stuff. He's like one of the highest agency people I know. He runs a hedge fund that's like a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund, and like crushes it in that. And he's like, I would try to talk to the physicists at Princeton or whatever, and he's can speak to like conventional physics. He can program computer. He's a genius polymath, and he'd be like, I try to speak to them and say, this is the data. And they'd say, oh, you have a file drawer issue or you have survivorship bias. And he'd be like, no, we controlled for that. And this is how we controlled for that. And they'd
Yeah.
be like, well, no, no, you didn't. Like, I don't know what to say. They would break their brain. So, yeah, that's you end up in these sort of like, I'm not willing to look at the data debates or whatever with
Mm.
these sort of, midwit conventional physicists. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson wouldn't even condescend himself to like look at like a data set around this stuff. Um, so yeah, until we get some big shift on things like that, I don't know if UFOs are like have to be bucketed in with that, or if they, they're things that are, downstream of parapsychology, which end up getting accepted, prior to UFOs. But it's a really tricky landscape, and it makes the like it once you start to like acknowledge the parapsychological truths behind a lot of this stuff, it's really tough because on a first order you have to like say like the UFO phenomenologically is like extremely real, which I obviously I believe it is. And then on a second order you have to be like, but you have these like sort of like fractured realities thing.
Yeah.
And then like it's like this really hard, and then they're like, well, you're crazy, you believe reality is sort of subjective. And you're like, but I have all this like decent, evidence to believe it is. And like you don't have any evidence that it's objective, so you
Mm.
end up in these sort of like, like loops, these tautological loops, these arguments that like are sort of metaphysical in their, implication. I think everybody anecdotally has had uh probably beyond statistically significant anecdotal personal experiences of wanting a thing to happen in their life and it showing up in a bizarrely specific way, or synchronicities that they just can't explain. And you can live in a world where like that's wrong because of physics, because some dude with a maybe a slightly higher IQ and like who wears a vest and like is in some ivory tower is telling you that that's that's not true. Or you can choose to like believe in that. And I think the world in which you believe in that is like a much better reality for your own like personal outcomes. But like it's up to everybody individually to decide. um but yeah, I think there are all these good arguments even scientifically that this stuff is very real.
Yeah, I remember Rupert Sheldrake. One of my favorite arguments he made was that they did this test that your dog actually knows when you're coming home. And they would do
Yes.
tests where they
Yeah.
would like before the guy gets home, they would call him and have him stop coming home. So
Yeah.
like they'd tell
Yeah.
someone to come, and then the dog would go to the door, and then when they called him and they knew the time they called him, and they had eyes on the dog, I don't know, through camera systems. When told him to go back to work, the dog would then be like, oh, okay, he's not coming home, and they
Yeah.
would go back. I love that.
No, pets know when their like owners are near, and babies know when their mothers are near, and there's this primordial connection that goes well beyond your like just sense perceptions clearly. And I think we all kind of know that on an intuitive level. And I think language and prefrontal cortex style Western intelligence cuts against that. And so the more you can, be in this kind of heady, abstract intellectual space, the less you're in that like intuitive space. And it makes sense that in some ways animals would be more attuned to these things. And I think Sheldrake also talks about how them, they sort of have premonitions around, or like, they sense sort of natural disasters and things.
Yeah.
And you also you look at like, videos around Skinwalker Ranch, you have like I think like a cow freaking out when they detect like a UAP like nearby, and you have people having hitchhiker effects where like their dogs and their pets or whatever are like freaking out more than they are, as if the dogs sense something in a way that like humans can't because we like over intellectualize and like it's a cliche, but I think it's true. As you develop one sense, or as one sense goes, another gets strengthened, or the opposite. You develop one sense, you probably lose another. And I think the people who are deepest on this stuff, whether it's Diane Hennessy Powell with the telepathy tapes or Joseph McMonigal, say that the mind itself is a sense, and that there's some sort of snap intuition that lies outside of the epistemological circuitry of inductive learning, and you just get this sort of snap intuition. And I think there's probably going to be some neuroscientific explanation for this. Whether it's that Julian Jaynes, like he's not super scientific, but the origins of consciousness and the bicameral mind, or um, you have this sort of left brain, right brain thing. Ian McGilchrist is another guy that writes
Mm.
about this. And we really have, I think the left brain, right thing is probably overrated in some ways, probably not, not a perfect dichotomy. But at the same time, I think we really have come to rely on like there was like an animistic world that, you know, we used to live in. And it's very easy to paint over the past with our modern epistemology and say the Greeks didn't actually see these gods or see these spirits or things. They were like pre-enlightenment. They didn't actually experience angels and demons affecting the material world. That was just before we had these sort of mathematical placeholders in the form of, inertia and gravity and concepts like that. And I think that is the epitome of hubris. I think your attentional patterns probably affect actually what you see on a much more fundamental level. And we're probably constantly drawing from a meme library, if you will, that superimposes itself onto reality, a reality that's like much deeper than we really aren't. We're seeing this sort of veiled illusion, which is that's a theme in like all religions.
That's a great point because there's this. I grew up atheist essentially until I really got into this topic. I was of the metaphysical kind of argument, like you said there, that's still a metaphysical argument, is that there is no existence or life after death, I guess, if you will, or something greater. And then really looking into this topic forced me to confront my own bias, where if this is possible, then that also has to be possible. And I've kind of hit the realm where I believe anything is possible, although I think there is only one reality, I guess, if you will. I don't think it's quite that subjective, and that's why I think you can come up, there's an infinite amount of incorrect arguments, I believe, and there's only one really correct argument. That's why I think it's very difficult to find a correct model of the world or a physics of reality. But it's much easier to say that one model is incorrect. I think it's very easy to debunk something, if you will, than to prove that something actually exists or to identify what the phenomenon is. It's much easier to say that there is a phenomenon and I don't know what it is than there is to say there's a phenomenon and I know exactly what it is.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. It's an extreme. It's whatever is going on has like this crazy whack-a-mole, like right when you're about to get the evidence, it disappears or something.
Yeah.
And it's extremely hard to find. And like and then right when you get demoralized or whatever, it like, some new thing pops up that's actually kind of hopeful.
Yeah.
But it just seems to be like, drags you along, and that itself feels like kind of, it's like Plato, you're dragged out of the cave and towards the light. Like it feels like this sort of, religious personal quest. It's very interesting. And I find it fascinating also when certain UFO researchers get really into like God or Jesus, like after they like know a lot. So like Oki Shannon was, a project manager at Los Alamos, and this guy Project Unity did this, interview with him, and he's like extremely, extremely religious. But he was also part of this advanced theoretical physics working group with Hal Puthoff, and like really deep on the UFO stuff. Um, A researcher of mine spoke with Eric Henry Wing's daughter, this woman, Erica Wing. Eric Henry Wing is this guy who Bill Steinman, who's this UFO researcher, in the 80s and 90s, um, died recently, actually. Um, he like found that he was the one guy that like he wasn't supposed to look into, Eric Henry Wing, because he was head of special projects at Wright Airfield in the
Huh.
50s,
Wow.
and then he moved to Kirtland Air Force Base, and like he kept getting these sort of reprisals like, don't look into this guy. And my researcher spoke to his daughter, and she's like extremely religious. And Scott Crane, is another researcher who I think had some interactions with Eric Walker, at Penn State, who's rumored to be sort of Majestic 12. You know, he he was rumored to be at the Kecksburg crash. He spoke to this guy, Ozadel, this, British physicist, our British Armenian physicist, and spoke to Steinman and all these people, and would say things about like the Majestic 12. He kicked Kit Green, who Kit Green, studied all these sort of, weird physiological effects of UFO stuff with Gary Nolan. He kicked Kit Green out of his office and was like, when Kit Green was questioning him on UFO programs, and was kind of tacitly admitting that like he was part of this stuff,
Hmm.
Eric Walker. And Scott Crane was one of these researchers who interacted with Eric Walker. And Scott Crane then just like converted and became like super religious. And I find that to be really interesting too. Like the people who they'll go on this like quest around the UFO thing, and then they're like they just come back to like sort of, God or Jesus or, Moses, whatever it is for them. Muhammad.
Well, he
I
did, right?
find that
Muhammad,
fascinating.
I mean, he meditated in a cave and then he basically met with
Yeah.
God, John Smith, he basically had some sort of interaction with an angel, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all
Joseph Smith.
telepathic. Sorry, Joseph Smith. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. It is. And it's interesting because like there's always a hierarchy of being, and the top is always God. And so, like, if you think about it, like, if you do believe that Jacques Vallée, Diana Pasulka, it's angels and demons from the past or whatever, just trying to prove that these things are real would be like not probably the best use of somebody's life. like,
Yeah.
like they are real. Of course they're real. But like, what should you be most focused on? Probably
Mm.
God, like the thing above them, and I'm always, I'm a very sort of, Gnostic person, in that I need like evidence and like direct experience and stuff. And so that sort of motivated this whole thing for me.
Mm.
So God itself is like, this very ineffable thing that's hard to it's hard to approximate. And we don't have, evidence for outside of, you could call it the God of the gaps, right? Like the fact that our world itself just feels like this crazy miracle, you know? Um, but yeah, it's just, I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it's a crazy miracle that you have to do. It's also you have to wake up
Yes.
and yeah. I think it's I look at like my dog, and I don't know if you have a dog. Do you have a dog? Curious.
I don't, I
Yeah.
did have a dog. I don't
Oh,
now.
sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
anyway,
okay.
yeah, you see the dogs, right? And they're very smart in many ways. But
Yeah.
like my dog, and I assume a lot of dogs, has no idea what a leash is. Like it can't put this idea into its head, right? That if the leash goes
Mm,
around a pole, there is nothing he can't move.
yeah,
He's going to be trapped.
yeah,
It's literally like he is evolved to not see the leash. It's invisible. It's
yeah.
completely invisible, right? It's obvious to a 3-year-old. A 3-year-old human could figure out, like, if I'm tied to a rope and I go around a pole, like if I keep going around the pole, I'm just going to hook myself to the pole. But my dog will just go around that pole until he's stuck to the pole, wrapped around it. And I think he doesn't have it in his world. Like the leash doesn't exist in his world. It's like he literally has evolved to not see the leash.
Yes. Well, that's what I that's what I worry about with some of these like summoning UFOs technique. It's like on the one hand, it's insane if you can get these things to show up. You get high resolution, cross sensor data or whatever. Like that's amazing, right? And then on the other hand, like, are you just like a raccoon chewing on the power lines of like a campsite? And they're like, stop chewing on the power line. They just show up, and then like occasionally they'll like jam your shit. They'll like jam your sensors and like fuck with you. Like, is that
Yeah.
like so it's a yeah, I think we are. That's a great analogy. It's like we're like the ant on like in the forearm of something so much larger than us, and it's so hard to sort of really grasp and understand what's going on. And there's a great book called Forbidden Knowledge by I think it's Roger Shattuck, and like you have all these like this like archetypal story of like Prometheus and Faust, you know, like going directly for the knowledge, and it usually like doesn't end well. For
Doesn't end well.
you have a couple of myths that sort of do are counter to that. Like you have this, Christian Rosenkreutz and the Rosicrucians or whatever. Like I think he just like stepped inside. He actually just witnessed the Ark of the Covenant and he saw everything and he wasn't burned. He went into the holiest of holies. Um, but I think that's very rare. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like all of our lives are like it's like a Werner Herzog movie or something where you're just like whether it's taking a rubber steamship up a mountain in Fitzcarraldo or whatever or, yeah, a steamship for it was like rubber mining or whatever rubber I don't know in South America or like you know Aguirre the Wrath of God, like there are all these like quixotic characters and like I don't know. These quests are definitely worthwhile, but we're like dust in the wind too.
Like dust in the wind, dude. I would love to see this guy on your channel. I've interviewed him once, and I should have an interview with him again. But I think it'd be great if anything, just to get him more exposure. Is Dean
Mm.
Radin? I don't know. Have you heard of Dean Radin, scientist?
Yeah, yeah. I've met Dean,
You
and
have.
we talked about yeah. We talked about doing a thing, and I should have him on. I think that'd be great. It's just I don't know, man. Like that stuff. You just I want to like show people how real it is, and
Yeah,
like he's been on the circuit for like
he has
a
forever.
couple of decades and
Yeah.
he knows his stuff and he does all these different experiments and they're all really interesting, but there's
Mm,
some sort of dark matter between that, well, just like the UFO thing, that and
mm,
like consensus reality. And I think that the UFO thing is shifting. And to
mm,
go against some of the maybe nihilism I've expressed in this interview, you know, I do think the gap is closing and people are, Tulsi Gabbard, the head of DNI, was like, we need disclosure on UFOs, like as part of
mm.
her mandate. Now, she's probably forgotten about it and, deciding whether or not to kowtow about, Epstein being, a real intelligence front or not, along with her colleagues,
Yeah.
right now, um, and isn't focused at all on UFOs. But the fact that she put it in her platform really cool. The fact that Don Jr. interviewed Ross Coulthart, like all these things are really cool. Jake Barber coming out, David Grusch. If you were to snapshot where we are now to like 7-8 years ago, yeah,
Mm.
you'd be like, the field's actually like made a lot of progress, and it's really cool to see that. But yeah, I'd love to interview Dean. Just my short answer. But I just I don't know. I get sort of demoralized with a lot of the parapsychology stuff where I'm like, it's fun to like have these conversations, but unless you have like a working model as to how some of this stuff works, the people who are going to believe you are just going to believe you, and the people who aren't are just not. And then if you can't turn it into science and tech, you know, I I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. But the guy I mentioned, one of my closest mentor, the Paralab guy,
Mm.
I've interviewed him twice now. And I haven't put it out because he wants it put out in like a precise, sort of way. And like the interviews weren't that inspiring. Like I was probably taking liberties with my own understanding of parapsychology, and he was kind of nitpicking about, where I was wrong or whatever. but I'm going to do something with him, um, and hopefully it's good. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think the parapsychology stuff, a lot of science will come out like when it's supposed to or something. Like I think there are all these scientific things that are really crazy that are real, and then why they don't seem to touch consensus reality. I just don't know why. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I would love like a live Faraday cage, like Gansfield experiment, you know?
Yeah, that would be cool.
I don't I was thinking of that to make that somehow reality, get Dean Raid in there or something, do a live Faraday test,
That would
you
be
know, there's just
awesome.
no way.
That that's a great idea. We should do that. Yeah, like a visual, like I found this person, they have no idea what's going on. They're gonna do this psychic experiment or whatever, and then Dean's
Yeah.
there, and yeah,
Or just have Dean
that's
design
cool.
the
Or you don't even
experiment.
have Dean there.
Yeah.
Dean designs the experiment, but he's not even
Yeah.
there or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, that's cool.
I
I
don't know.
like
It
it.
seems like
Double
something like
blind.
that. But I'd be remiss if we don't talk about the tech. You've looked so much into like the biofield Brown effect. You're so knowledgeable. You can just pull
Yeah.
all these facts out of your brain. But have you looked into Chris Chiba? Have you seen his recent breakthrough? Oh, you'll love it, man. So he's a Princeton professor, but
Okay.
this new experiment he came out with, he just did it in his garage. So basically,
What?
he
What
looked
is it?
into. So it's amazing, dude. And I'll put up some visuals right now so the audience can know. All right, so basically, this is the experiment, and so dude did Chris Chiba is he said he found a loophole through Maxwell's equations. So he went through
What?
Maxwell's equations and he found a loophole for where you could actually get you could interact with the magnetic field of an object. Um, so basically, there's and you can look this up after,
What?
but
This is crazy.
yeah, there's confusion with where does the magnetic field of the Earth spin with the Earth or does it stay static, right? And so what he determined is, and that's still up for debate, like they still don't really know. Modern physics doesn't know if the magnetic field of a magnet spins with the object or if it stays static. And so,
Hmm.
so this guy Chris Chiba basically went through all the Maxwell equations and said, "Oh, there's this loophole," right? And basically, he released a paper in 2016. Okay, yeah. So here's the paper, right? And so he wrote this
Hmm.
paper, and it's called "Electric Power Generation from Earth's Rotation Through Its Own Magnetic Field," and that's him, Chris Chiba, and I don't know who Kevin Hand is. Just his friend. And he published this in 2016, and so he
Mm.
went on Professor Simon's channel, and he said no one
Hmm.
contacted him or anything. Like nothing happened. Like
Hmm.
nobody did anything. No one said, "Hey, let's try this out."
Hmm.
So this was in 2016. Let me see. Yeah, and basically it goes through and says he identified a loophole, and he shows that
Hmm.
voltage could be continuously generated in a low magnetic Reynolds number conductor rotating with Earth, and provided that there's some certain constraints made, and I can talk about it in a second.
Hmm.
But basically, he says we solve the relevant equations for one laboratory realization, and from this solution, we predict voltage, magnitude, and sign dependence on the system dimension relative to Earth's rotation. Okay, so this was in 2016. He has this theoretical abstract saying that you can actually create a voltage
Hmm.
and sign, right? So plus or minus.
Hmm.
And so fast forward now, again, no one does anything. So then fast forward to this year, and so he
Hmm.
just does it. No one contacted him. No one did anything. So he just built it in his
Hmm.
garage. And so what you see here is this is I think it's a magnetic ferrite material. So it's a specific
Okay.
type of material, and it has to be in the shape of a tube. So it
Hmm.
has to be a tube, and that has something to do with the topology of it, and that has to do with the theory that again goes above my pay grade in
Hmm.
electromagnetics. But according to this now, they just it's sitting here static, but spinning now on the Earth, it creates microvolts. And
Mm.
actually, and you can rotate this thing. And he said it will rotate through zero and then reverse charge. So it'll actually push
Whoa.
microvolts the other direction. Um, so you're talking about something not moving, but is creating a electric charge. Right now it's microvolts, but
Whoa.
yeah, this would go a long way towards electromagnetics.
Whoa.
Yeah,
I
this is
gotta
huge.
talk to this guy. This is fascinating.
Yeah, he's at Princeton,
So,
and he went on Professor Simon's show, which is not that
yeah, I
big.
love that. I love this show. Yeah.
It's smaller than yours. And since then, I've seen nothing, like literally nothing on it. Sabine Hassenfelder did a show on it, and she said, "Yeah, it's
What did she
possible."
say?
She said it could be
It's
possible.
possible.
Yeah, but that's it. Like
Whoa.
it's just
Well,
died on
that's
the
cool
vine.
because she could be a Debbie Downer if
Yeah,
sometimes. So
she can
that's
be.
cool.
Yeah,
Um, I gotta look into that's fascinating. Wow.
yeah. This is right
Cool.
up. It's so awesome, and yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Chris Chiba. So check that out.
I will check that out.
Hmm.
That is really interesting. So it's basically the ability to tap into the Earth's electromagnetic field to produce voltage, which I don't really know of anything that can do that now.
Well, basically, the Faraday effect, right? So any conductive material is transferred through a magnetic field, right? If you have a changing magnetic field, it's going to generate electric current. So the point is, if you're spinning on the Earth, right? If you're spinning on the Earth, if the field of the Earth is static, then you are moving. You're moving through a changing magnetic field,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so
And
that's what
so
he's doing.
you can then create microvolts or whatever based on the differential of, electromagnetism as you're moving or whatever.
Yeah, basically, if you have the right topology, which he argues is this shape of a tube, and you're spinning with the Earth, that it's moving through the Earth's own magnetic field, and that was his first paper, is creating electric, I think generating electric energy or charge, I believe, through the Earth's own magnetic field.
So does the tube have to be moving?
No, well, the tube is just static, but it's moving because the Earth is spinning.
Uh-huh. So like would this be, I'm looking at the title of this thing, like the Filippo Bondi or whatever, Biondi,
Yeah,
SAR Doppler tomography showing that there's sort of like this energy grid below the pyramids or whatever. The idea would be like they would be tapping into the Earth's electromagnetic field via these like tubes or something.
so that's my speculation, right? This is from my video.
Oh,
You know,
it's from your video.
yeah,
Okay.
this is my video. So that's what I speculate is that could the pyramids, could this explain the pyramids? Um,
Hmm.
that,
So
but
interesting.
that's just my speculation for a few different reasons. But if you can generate electrical energy from just the Earth spinning, and you're through unknown physics, right, that we currently don't understand, then I speculate that you could that that could be possible that you could get some strange effects from the pyramids. Um,
Mm,
I just interviewed them. I have an interview coming out that'll be before this video actually.
mm.
Biondi on Friday, and man, that guy is legit. Like I don't see how his tech is not legitimate.
So cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I've heard good things about him. I'm going to Europe this summer and wanted to ideally catch up with him. That's so cool. Well, I'm excited for that interview, man. That'll be fun.
It was yeah, it's I really enjoyed it. So with Trevor Grossi and Filippo Biondi, it was the third time actually. Finally got Filippo, finally nailed him down.
Cool.
But it's legit, man.
Sweet.
He goes through. I asked him everything I could think of on the technique. I mean, he did it in a laboratory in his garage.
Yeah.
Basically, he shows, and I asked him questions about, hey, how does that work? Actually, in his garage of the laboratory. So really interesting, and
I
that
think if
tech is
he
breakthrough.
seems like, I mean, I feel like if he laid off the like, we don't know if it's a perfect AI reconstruction point, The other stuff feels hard to argue with. That like that those star Doppler tomography scans are real.
Yeah.
There's definitely something going on under there.
Yeah.
So I feel like if he was a little more like, I don't know what's going on, but I don't know. I'd love to talk to you, man. This is all armchair coming from me. I don't really understand it, so it's wild. It's cool.
Yeah. Well, basically, and I confirmed with them directly, is it's the same tech as it's called laser vibrometry. You're a history buff. So do you remember back in the CIA, in the Cold War, the CIA, and now they have it where you can shine a laser at a window, and they have
Mm.
a little machine with headphones on it, and you can actually hear what they're saying inside the room.
Whoa.
Have you heard of this?
No.
Oh,
No, that's
yeah, dude, you'll
nuts.
love all this stuff. Yeah, look up laser
This is
vibrometry.
crazy.
Yep.
Okay. Oh
And
wow, that's crazy.
so there's a device, and they have them now. You can purchase them where it'll shine a
Mhm.
laser and that's why there's no windows on skiffs, right? Well, that's
Mm.
obviously you can see in, right? But you could like
Mm-hmm.
see screens and you could read
Or you
people's
could
lips.
hear in too.
But what they had, the tech exists called laser vibrometry, where you just shine a
What?
laser on the window and it picks up the little micro vibrations on the window,
Fucking crazy.
and so it
Well, that, I
transmits.
mean, hearing takes place via like little vibrations, like in the your inner ear, and you have like bone conduction where like I think was it Beethoven who was deaf
Yeah.
and he would like literally like bite on like a some sort of charged rod or not even charged like metallic rod that was attached to his piano
Hmm.
and um and he would sort of hear it would circumvent the outer ear or whatever which was you know messed up and just go straight to the kind of vibrations or whatever and he would listen to music that way so yeah, interesting. So
Yeah,
okay, so sorry.
that's what they're doing. Yeah, but no, that's basically the tech. And I asked him, "Hey, is it like this?" And he said, "It's basically exactly like that, except now we have a 100
Mhm.
kilometer long antenna because it's in space. It's synthetic aperture radar. So the aperture is the radar diameter. So the point is, since you're so far away and the satellite's traveling so fast, you're effectively creating a giant radar. It's around, he said, dozens of kilometers. So it's probably less than 100 kilometers. But basically, you have this really wide aperture radar. And so you're doing the same thing. You're shining like the laser down on the ground, and and then you're able to listen to what's actually the vibrations going through the ground. And I think from my perspective, the reason he's so aggressive in his claims is he's so confident in the technology. Like I think he just has so many examples, and like he's 100% confident in his mind it exists.
The technology has been used to like I think map magma chambers inside volcano. Like it's a real technology. I've looked at in venture capital context synthetic aperture radar companies that were mentioned in the article that his thing came out with, like
Yeah.
Capella Space and Umbra, and that
Yeah.
I looked at both of those companies. So
That's
that's
it.
it's a real modality, and it gets you to higher resolution than optical like Planet Labs and like those sort of constellations. So I know that's real. And then I've heard Sar Doppler again, Sabina Hassenfelder, who is a Debbie Downer in a lot of cases, who
Yeah.
also argued against the AI reconstruction, admitted that Sar Doppler tomography is a very real modality. So like I think if anybody's saying there's nothing underneath the pyramids, that they're being extremely dogmatic, based on this. And then what's underneath there, that feels like the mystery. And then this is what fucking sucks again, where it's like maybe this just stays stuck in this liminal space is like that thing is totally gate kept. Like, is the Egyptian Ministry of Culture ever going to let anybody, especially these like renegade scientists who want to
Yeah.
rewrite history, down
Yeah.
there to see? Probably not, right? So,
Probably not. But I think you can prove it anywhere else. That's the point why I'm so optimistic on this is
yeah.
if the technology is real and talking to them and looking into them, at least it seems like it could definitely be possible based on their previous examples. But if it's real, it's so profitable, right? I mean, you'll be able to analyze, while you're drawing gas from a current gas field, you can actually analyze like how
Mm.
much is left in there. It could be for any sort of minerals exploration. Like,
Mm.
and I think the military applications have already been known. I'd be very surprised. Like how did they know? And again, this is where you get in trouble. I don't speak on behalf of any government, but how did they know where those tunnel systems were? When they bombed Iran, you got to be pretty damn accurate. You have to be
Yeah,
really
man.
accurate.
What's the like? Is it ICI? Yeah, ICI is yeah Southern California based synthetic aperture radar company, and I think they're Finnish originally. They're from Finland. But the fact that they have like a Southern California outfit to me shows that they had to do that to work with the American government. So
Hmm.
yes, no, I mean, you get to like 0.25, like you get to like really impressive levels of granularity and resolution with this stuff. So it's much better than optical. So yeah, no, that's definitely real. And then yeah, the Doppler tomography part is the part that I'm less familiar with, which
Yep.
you might explain the tunnel thing for sure.
Well,
I think even Biondi says like I can't talk about the work that I do, outside of the this stuff with the pyramids. But I think Biondi himself does work with the Italian, military and government.
military,
So
no comment.
yeah,
But and
yeah. So yeah,
the biggest thing would be the S4, right? Imagine that, and I'm sure the U.S. government would be terrified of this, right? If you could see where all the tunnels were, but like just imagine right away if we could confirm that the S4 hangars are really there, like Bob Lazar is saying. I mean,
yeah.
you could immediately corroborate. I just see huge breakthroughs.
I think they are there.
Yeah, but we have no proof, right? Everyone's asking, where's the proof? Where's the evidence? What if now you
I
go
think we're gonna
through?
get. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, we'll see. I would. I don't know. Who knows?
Cool. And
But
then,
I think I.
um, I wanted to ask you about the biofield Brown effect. You talked about, you're obviously
Mm,
at least way more expert than me in Townsend Brown. I've looked into his effect a little bit. Um,
mm,
but what I was really impressed by was this one encounter, and we call him Collider Bob. That's what
mhm,
Jack and I call him. But this just came out, and it was on a flight safety channel, and I thought it was a very compelling. One of my more popular videos this year,
mhm,
and it's this guy Bob Pett, and he's just coming out
mhm,
recently publicly, and he
mhm,
came out on the flight safety channel with Todd Curtis, and
mm,
a very compelling UAP encounter. And what he talks about is this crazy looking like antenna. Sorry,
mm,
let me get a better picture of it. This crazy looking antenna
mhm,
that flew supersonic right past his glider, and he got a very good look at it. And in a glider, it's quiet, it's clear.
mhm,
There's no vibration or anything, so he got an amazing view of this thing, and for quite a bit of time, right? You're talking
mhm,
20, 30 seconds. He saw this thing, and based off the distances, because the glider pilot knows exactly where the landmarks are. So he knew
mhm,
it flew 7 miles in less than 10 seconds. So that's well past supersonic. That's like Mach 4. And then
yeah.
it flew right next to the glider. And so he got an amazing look at this thing. And the structure of it, the structure of it was amazing. So it's basically, it was like 4 to 5 feet tall, and it was like a flying lollipop where it had
Whoa.
this black structure was like a black hole, he said. Let me get a better picture here. So this was like it was just like an absence of light. So like a black hole, and then protruding out of it, out of the bottom of this flying lollipop thing, was this antenna, like 3 to 4 inches long, and it had three. He said like actually they were square type structures on it, and at the top there was a silver reflective like hat, shaped like a little UFO thing. And I had a lot of the in the audience. They said, "Hey, that seems like the Townsend Brown biofield Brown effect." So I don't know if you were
Mm-mm.
aware of this. I want
Yeah, I went through it before this. I don't know. It's hard to say because capacitor like definitely is curved like that. So like you have two electrodes in a capacitor, and they're both sort of kind of concave towards each other, and it's sort of in his experiment it was an asymmetric capacitor, so the you have the negative electrode is larger than the positive electrode, and it creates this sort of possible differential that again, I think we're sort of weak on the theory, but the negative sort of chases the positive. um so yeah, is that top thing this that might look like it somewhat, but you need like a bottom thing. You need two capacitor, you need two
Hmm.
electrodes facing each other. So I don't see that. That's
Okay.
insane. That's like the coolest looking thing ever. But yeah. No, I don't think it really resembles a Byfield Brown effect
Oh, okay.
necessarily.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
but it's wild. That's so interesting. The thing that I think of when I see that is like, if you do the original translation of St. Francis of Assisi having his experience on Mount Laverne, it's flaming torch. And I'm like, that would look like an antenna today, like a torch or
Hmm,
something,
yes.
you know? So, but that, I don't know. Yeah, Byfield Brown effect also, I think the super rudimentary effect that the craft itself wouldn't resemble the experiment that proves the effect, if that makes sense. You'd
Hmm.
use the effect from the experiment into, and implement something probably involving counter rotating cylinders, maybe superconductors, maybe like the Plekletnov-Ning-Lee stuff. Um, so yeah, I think there's probably a connection there between Brown's stuff with direct current and Ning-Lee's gravity shielding stuff, um, with the AC current.
Like some of these topics are so difficult. I know you've looked into like the Nazca mummies, and you talked
Yeah,
extensively about that on Joe Rogan, and I'm looking forward to
yeah,
whatever work you have coming out. But what
yeah.
about Boogosphere? Have you looked into the Boogosphere?
I've held it for an extended period of
You did?
time, and like, yeah,
Okay, I didn't know that.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know what to say on it. I'm inclined to believe that like Jaime isn't lying, and that like this guy probably is just an earnest guy that filmed the thing anomalously flying around, and then he picked it up and then he sent it to Jaime, and I don't think Jaime's lying about it. And then you have all these like weird readings coming off of it, and so but then you look at the thing and it looks kind of fake. It
yeah,
looks like, my first impression was like, there's no way this is real. Like, it's like
mm,
the weird etchings and stuff, but the
yeah.
etchings also pattern match and resemble what a lot of people say, their alien experiences are, look like or whatever when they look at quote unquote alien artifacts. So I don't know, man. It's stuck in this sort of liminal space for me. Um, I um, encountered it with my friend Amar from Yes Theory,
Mhm.
and both of us were initially skeptical, and then we like I don't know, learned more about the weird fact pattern around it, and like held it in our hands. And there was a guy there who was like an employee of Jaime, and like when he would hold it, his whole hand would like all the hair would raise on his body, and they detect like weird electromagnetic signatures around this thing. It's 3x the hardness of normal like aerospace grade aluminum. And then it involves there's layers. They're like the external shell is like singular, and then the layer below that is like two hemispheres like conjoined together. The thing is weird, man. I don't know. And then the microchip grid thing, it's
Yeah.
so strange, that design. Here's the good news. It's being tested by aerospace contractors that work with NASA. And so my hope is that we get some real answers soon. But The issue with even that is like you do these tests and then you get some anomalous thing from the tests. It's like Gary Nolan's isotope ratio. Like you have a prestigious university, Stanford. You have Gary Nolan, this tenured, microbiologist who's like Nobel nominee, whatever. And he's saying that you have isotope ratio, and he shows you the pieces, and they're little pieces or whatever. But I'm just worried that with the Boogosphere, it's like we get some similar like, yeah, it's weird, it's anomalous. We don't know,
Hmm.
um, and so like still this sort of cat and mouse thing where you're getting kind of teased. But we'll see. I'm open. I don't know.
Yeah, because I watched the recent or the conference or presentation, if you will, and Eric Burleson that was there, and I was like, damn,
Yep.
man, that is amazing.
Yeah, it's cool.
And they had the
Yeah, it's awesome.
video.
He went.
Yeah, and they allegedly apparently have everything, right? They have the human accounts. They have so witness testimony. You have videos, and then you have this object, which looks like it was just
Yeah,
etched by like a 8-year-old.
yeah,
Some
yeah. And you have video. You have video that's like 7 minutes long or something with like
yeah,
there is a little gap when the guy picks it up, so you have to note that. But it's a long video, and I don't think that the guy like is been hesitant to go fully public and not remain anonymous. So I don't know. Maybe he's playing some sophisticated prank, like social psychology prank on people. I don't, but like I don't think so.
hmm.
So I don't know, man. I don't know. It's fascinating, but I don't. I also like. I can't conclude anything super, in a bold way. But then on the other side, I think people were like, it's for sure fake. I'm like, what are you basing that on? How can you say that? Like, why would you say that? And I've spent enough time with Jaime Maussan, who he's another guy where like you put hoaxer next to this guy's name enough
Yeah.
that you're just gonna like stigmatize him. But he's not. I find him to be more bold stated and credulous than maybe me. Um, but I don't think he's intellectually disingenuous or dishonest. And I think in his mind, he's almost a little more like simple in like a cool way, where he's like, there's certain things where like I feel like I have to hold back on, like, actually, like I wish I could like my instinct is that a lot of these things are just real, but like, um, I think he's just like, look, these things, they're tridactyl beings. They're, you found them in a cave with diatomaceous earth. You think this like Walkero gravedigger, like, like synthetically created them, and then one has a tridactyl fetus inside of it, and like he's like, of course it's real. Like, what do you mean? And then
Hmm.
I think he maybe takes a leap in saying he's sure it's extraterrestrial. I don't think the signal to noise ratio is great on the DNA, but maybe we'll have some interesting updates there soon as well. So that's exciting. But yeah, I- it's I don't find him to be a dishonest actor at all. Um, you know, maybe there's some subconscious thing, when you're in news for that long where, you know, you have to speak slightly, you have to get headlines or something. But like I don't know, man. I don't. You spend a lot of time with the guy. He's like independently very wealthy, just based on his like news channel covering conventional stuff, and like
Hmm.
sells a product that does like millions and millions of revenue, and it's like a health product. It's like algae and kelp or something. Um, so this guy does it. I mean, it's like a true like passion of his, and I don't think it's driven by it's not a grift. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is great to hear, actually. I know when Nazca Mummies originally came out, I came out super pro of it. This is what we've been waiting for, and I end up retracting the video. And then looking back, I was like, I shouldn't have retracted it. I guess because either way,
No.
you put it out there, it's out there. But I was so positive on
Yeah.
it, and then I pulled the video. And I interviewed Leslie Kane, and I asked her about it, and it seems like just in the community, I don't know if Richard Dolan went down. There was some event where Richard Dolan went down, and it was a similar Nazca Mummy type event where Jaime Maussan had found, he alleged were alien bodies, etc. And it turns out it didn't pan out. Yeah,
What does that mean, not panning out? Like,
yeah.
who, what, like, I think the rule of thumb is like, if somebody says don't look into something, you should look into it, and then
Yeah.
and they're coming from some official like channel. It's like okay, and then only listen to first principles arguments. So if somebody
Yep.
says this is fake because like Steve Mira told me, we measured the morphology type that you were highest conviction on, me speaking, like highest conviction on, slapping some probability that they're real would be these M types, these like larger hominid creatures or whatever. So Steve Mira is like, I think the bones from Maria, one of these M types, one of the phalanges is, male, one is female. We have these like University of Paris studies where we looked at this stuff. That I take super seriously because I'm like,
Mm.
okay, it's like first principles arguments. Like he's
Yep.
saying that this is true. It's kind of beyond my pay grade to debunk that, and say that like the genetics were, weren't studied properly. So like I take that very seriously. Uh, but somebody being like, we know now that that is like we've decided
Yep.
collectively, like, I'm like, fuck off. Like what are you talking about? Like you need first principles stuff. And so I'm going to come out with a documentary on it, and it's just going to be a fire hose of probably conflicting information on where you should, you know, lay your chips, but facts, just facts, and then you can
Mm.
decide for yourself. And hopefully that helps us, snap it to a grid, either true or false, at some point in the near future. Because I do think we're going to do some interesting follow up work on it, and start to know more conclusively soon. But again, that's my hope. But who knows? But yeah, no, I don't trust anybody that says, you know, they say you can't look into a thing, or they say something's fake, and then
Look into.
they don't give you a good reason as to why. That's, if anything, it's a reverse indicator. So you should look into it.
That's awesome, man. I was really excited to hear that you are looking into it, like seriously. Just I'm so far
Yeah,
away. I'm in a different continent. It's such a deep, large topic. The Nazca mummies. I'm really glad you're looking
yeah.
into it.
I'll say this as well. Like I do think they're look. I'm friends with a lot of people who think about disclosure uh more in this like stepwise, like managed process. Like Carl Nell thinks about it in this like, we need a panel, and we need to, whatever, we need to, like, people will be shocked if they knew or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just think the disclosure people are all gonna lose if we don't get like more, like just more. Like you're already at over 50% consensus, like probably in the US, that UFOs are real. So if you say, and that, but like, there are people who are like, well, if we find out that beings are hybrids or this or that, it's like too much. It's too much. But it's
Yeah.
like, no, it's just true. Just, you should just seek truth.
Yeah.
And if you go for the managed process, it's going to probably blow up, and it's probably just not going to work super well. So again, I'm happy to like work with those people. I understand where they're coming from philosophically. I like a lot of them, consider them friends, but I'm more in the just like, let's just like let this stuff out, you know.
Yeah, everything we try and control as humanity just gets screwed up. It seems like.
Yeah, yeah. It's always, whenever you try to hit a triple bank shot, one of the banks is going to get fucked up, and you're going to get a trajectory that it's like America like trained, you know,
Oh, Bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden,
Yeah.
and like, and like it was working with Saddam at one point in the Iran-Iraq war, and like you're gonna create some like, and so this topic is like this. Think about like American neocon neoliberal foreign policy for the last 50 years, where we're like, just it's a hydra. You cut one head off, you get five in its place. Game of whack-a-mole. It's probably similar with this UFO disclosure, where like you try to do some like managed thing, and it's gonna blow up in your face. The best, I thought that the congressional thing, the recent one with Eric Davis and Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and stuff, like I thought that could have gone better. It felt like the takeaway was like, this irrigation crop circle or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was really really frustrating. Um, So I didn't think that went particularly well, if you wanted to actually push the this stuff forward. Um, but the one the one line that I loved in the whole thing was like Eric Davis was
Yeah.
like, yeah, like if there is disclosure, like the NHI are in charge of it. And which true, it's a total logical fallacy to think you can manage it. If you believe in the NHI thing,
Hmm.
you can't simultaneously believe you can like manage a thing that involves them revealing themselves if they're like more powerful than you. Like it's literally like a logical fallacy. So I thought that was like the one good line from what was like a fairly frustrating uh, hearing.
I think, and that would explain a lot. Hey, man, thank you so much for your time today. I had just one final question. This is from Ali and Justin. They run a UAP Society,
Cool.
UAP News Show.
Nice.
They're huge fans, and they
Sweet.
asked, "What is your greatest hope for the future of humanity?"
Oh, I love it. Um, I don't know. Feels like humans, myself included, many times, mostly are like chasing like the wrong things, like the wrong metrics. And it's like this cult of scale and of money and, material world stuff. And everybody's sort of hypnotized by that, or like, most people are. And I think there's this other probably subset that are focused on like, love and virtue and, contemplation of kind of the metaphysical and things that transcend, faith in higher things. And if we could shift, more towards that, and away from like the material world status games thing, that would be a great way, for humanity to go. And the tricky thing with studying UFOs is UFOs and aliens are like this generic thing. And, if you believe in the angels and demons dichotomy, which I roughly do, then like half the time you're studying really dark shit.
Yeah,
And like, it's bound up in like weird, like the occult and like, control systems and, you even get into Jacques Vallée's stuff and it's like, you know, like they're using like Pavlovian conditioning and like BF Skinner style stuff to like get us to believe certain things. Like it's weird. And the abductions feel at times like
yeah,
demonic or something. So I really, if I think the thing that's amazing about the alien thing is it breaks our materialist reductionist worldview,
mm,
because you're seeing something that's observable in the form of UFOs and maybe even abduction experiences, and you can study that stuff scientifically, and like you can say there, probably government there have been like government interfaces with this, government programs, so it's like easier for people to understand. But really, like UFOs should be the thing that like gets you to God, and it shouldn't be that if you get lost at UFOs or whatever, you're like stuck on first base. That's probably like not the way to live your life, is just to like create some like encyclopedic ontology in your brain of like, like arcana, like lore, like esoteric lore or whatever. Like that's I don't know if that's you're probably lost the plot. So yeah, I don't know. My hope for humanity is, and I should definitely take my own advice here. It's just like I don't know. We have faith in higher things and become better people, and we we lose our obsession with these sort of lower metrics, which yeah, I mean it's gonna like blow the world up. Like it's not gonna lead anywhere good if we don't transcend them.
yeah. Amazing. That's my hope, for increasing knowledge. I think the AI revolution we're going through right now, decentralized information, just like we talked about. The fact that Jake Barber could hear Mike Herrera give that testimony, changed his actions in the future. I think
Yeah,
this decentralized information that you're definitely a part of, I think we're all a part of, I think
you are too.
is my hope that it
Yeah,
brings knowledge and affects us in that way.
it already is. I think breakthroughs occur through consilience. So like the fact that you can cross-reference a Princeton's professor on the Earth's electromagnetism via some tube thing, and
Mhm.
then some Italian researcher who's doing studies of SAR Doppler tomography under the pyramid. Like, that's amazing. That's this, E.O. Wilson is this biologist who wrote a book called Consilience. And that, I think the
Mhm.
scientific breakthroughs that occur through interdomain knowledge. And we've lived in this hyper specialized era. And there's a lot of dark stuff that comes with the AI stuff, but there's a lot
Mhm.
of really good stuff too. And the breaking down of the compartments is a really positive after effect of AI, where you get this
Mhm.
sort of increased consilience based knowledge. You have amateurs like me and like you who can have be like a mile wide and
Yeah.
a few inches deep and but make these really important connections and then distribute important work that like the 200 IQ physics professor stuck in string theory, isn't doing anything, and
Yeah.
like, and we're doing stuff that's actually like moving the needle. So yeah, it's exciting, man. The final thing I'll say is I feel like people over-index on like you have Stephen Greer on, and it's like it's just ZPE, and it's stuck in it's in this mystery box in the government, and it's going to come out, and once the 0 point energy comes out everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And like, I hate that. I hate that. I think it's the dumbest, like, it's, it's so technocratic and it abdicates all, humans of their own
Mhm.
personal responsibility to like be better people. And it's kind of like the name of the show, Alchemy. It's your, the science you get is the science you deserve or whatever. And so, when if we ever unlock the Byfield Brown thing or unlock, any of these like really exciting novel breakthroughs, it'll be probably stepwise commensurate with our own conscious understanding and, our
Mhm.
own, self-reflection and personal progress. And so, I love that as like a model for, um, to me, it's like a noble mythology. Like if because there's so many people who just go for truth and then they don't realize that working on themselves has anything to do with the truth they get or whatever.
Oh, that's amazing, Jesse. That's why you have a killer channel, man. That's why you're killing me in the views, man. I think
Dude,
it's so smart, dude. So passionate. Obviously, people can tell that from your work.
well, likewise, man. And I love the stuff you've been doing, and I feel like you're experiencing this like exciting, especially with the Beyondy stuff. So
It's super
I don't know,
exciting.
man. Yeah, I think, like I was saying, we got to move off the metrics. Like, I don't know, my last video like
Yeah,
didn't perform well objectively, but I'm very, very proud of it. And like that's, who cares about all that shit? It's let's
yeah. I
just
found. I think that's
hopefully
most
we can.
important.
Yeah, it's like what, none of it ultimately. You don't remember any of those little things. It's always like you know, yeah. What did we push forward, and what were the kind of magical moments? And you're doing, you know, the same thing. So I'm excited. We'll see. Let's see where things go. It's a a lot of irons in the fire between the mummies and the Booga thing and
Yeah.
the secret science stuff. Like something's gotta give. Hopefully.
I think it will, man. Yeah, and that's what. And I've we talked before where I was like, man, I've thought of quitting. Maybe multiple times, but then
Yeah, me
it's
too.
really like this is the best part of it is getting to make these relationships and meet people such as yourself who I think are really intent on finding the truth, at all costs, I think. But you do have to make it sustainable, mentally and
Yeah,
physically. So
I know. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, totally, man. It's one of these things where, I think what's meant for you always comes back around. So even if you give it up like temporarily, it'll come back if it's supposed to. And it it I'm sure it would for you. Like I'm sure you can't quit. That would be
yeah,
my
I
guess.
can't.
Like
Yeah,
like
I
like
can't. Yeah.
I stopped my channel for 9 months. I didn't
I know
release
you didn't
anything for
make a
two
video
years.
for a while. I was like, yeah, wondering what's going on if you're working on some giant movie or something, because it'd be months, and you'd come out with something amazing.
I didn't between Graham Hancock, I think, and David Grusch. I didn't come out with anything, and I was in Denmark, and I was with Amar from Yes Theory, and Grush happened to be a fan of Yes Theory, and Amar was like, "Dude, you have an alien-focused channel, and you're not trying to cover your friend who you've known for 2 years, who just like made like global news with Ross Coulthart." And he's like, you could definitely connect certain threads that like, the Ross thing was very matter of fact, and like. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm sick of all this shit. Like, fuck
Yeah.
this. Like, and then we called Dave, and he kind of convinces me, and we called Dave, and it was like, do you want to do a collab with Yes Theory and me? And I'm convinced the Yes Theory thing really helped because Yes Theory has this massive global channel, and they're very positive, and
Hmm.
the whole thing just kind of happened very serendipitously. And then when that came out, I was like, I'm back in the thing.
Yeah. It's just like a bomb, man, out of nowhere.
Well, I think that those are the most cool things with disclosure is when things come out of left field, and you should always be skeptical if something feels a little managed or whatever. But yeah, per our conversation, I just don't think it can be. I think it's happening on its own timeline.
Well, cool. Well, definitely if you come to Europe, man, stop by Portugal. We'll meet up.
Yeah, yeah.
If you haven't been to Fatima, that place is insane. If you haven't looked into the Fatima phenomena,
I, I
it's
know
amazing.
the story, and I'd love to check that out, and I'd love to hang, man. I love Portugal, so I think I told you this, but I was considering moving to Porto at one point
Oh, really? Oh,
in my life. Yeah, yeah, like 2 years ago.
wow.
So I absolutely love it there. I've been to Nazaré too. I have some friends who are big wave surfers who
Wow.
um, hang there a lot. So yeah, man, I'll try to stop by for sure.
Yeah. Nazaré is super cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Jesse. And everyone, I'm sure, knows your channel. If you haven't, then go check out American Alchemy. It's got amazing stuff. Yeah, breadth of videos, not just UAPs, but definitely focus UAPs lately. So go check them
Yeah,
out.
man. Well, I appreciate you, and yeah, I know I won't out this, but we have a possible exciting collab with you on my channel in the future. So
Cool.
I hope that materializes, and yeah, maybe we can do it in person in Europe or something. But well, let's figure that out.
That'd be sweet, man. All right. Thanks, bro.
All right, thanks, Chris. Appreciate you, man.